I want to bring to the stage our executive director, someone who, together, we co-founded Equality Florida back in 1997, and it has been just a joy to work with her, both because of her incredible work ethic, which scares the rest of the staff sometimes, but also because she brings such a vision and a passion and a just deep sense of justice to this work. And we're thrilled to have her with us in Miami tonight, Executive Director Nadine Smith.
Hello, everybody. All right. Well, I have great news. I want to start with the best possible news. The legislative session is over. So, yeah, we're safe for now. You know, I appreciate that Damien, you know, really lifted up the struggle that is ahead for us. And I know as deeply as we celebrated marriage, we also warned that with that tremendous victory would come tremendous backlash. And we're seeing it all across the country. More anti-LGBT pieces of legislation have been filed since we won marriage than all the other years combined. And when I say it's not just that there are many of them, it's that they are truly awful. In fact, Florida had the worst anti-LGBT bill filed in the country. It was so bad that it would have allowed, for example, a couple that went to Macy's to get an engagement ring, if the clerk decided that he or she objected to the fact that you were getting married, they could turn you away. And if Macy's said, hey, that's against our policy, Macy's management would be violating the law. That's how outrageous this bill was. And then in addition to that one, there was the Pastor Protection Act, you know, because of those roaming gangs of gay couples dragging preachers out of their bed in the middle of the night and forcing them to marry. Yeah, no, it didn't happen. So, but it was very important. The legislature wanted a Pastor Protection Act. And this bill we called the Trojan Horse, because it was the language that passed in Texas after it had been whittled down to something that was better than what they started with. Well, that's where they were starting in Florida. And we said, they're going to move this bill through, and their plan is to add every single bad amendment. So we have been very vigilant in Tallahassee. We were able to stop that terrible bill I first described from even getting a Senate sponsor. And we were able to neutralize the Pastor Protection Act. We got the sponsors to agree not to add a single amendment, and we got them to modify the language so it wasn't so vague as to allow actual discrimination. So basically, they passed a law that does what the First Amendment already protects. We got away, we escaped a session that could have been quite terrible for us, and we need only look to Georgia, where the same pastor protection legislation that we had in Florida got amended to add the same kind of discriminatory provisions. And suddenly Georgia is in the headlines like Indiana was just a few years ago. So the bad news is the backlash is real. We're experiencing it in Florida. The good news is when we stand up to that backlash, we are not standing alone. Our coalition partners are with us. There are Republicans in Tallahassee that fought with us behind the scenes to stop bad amendments from being added. And we're seeing growing bipartisan support. And quite frankly, people like Donald Trump, some of the excesses in the Republican presidential primary are really calling the question. And there are, yes, some Republicans who are embracing that hateful rhetoric, but there are more than a few who are suddenly saying, you know what, I don't know what's happened to this party, I don't recognize it anymore, but I know I'm going to stand with you guys up here. And another reason that's driving that is less altruistic, but also very real. And that is redistricting means there's an awful lot of senators who suddenly discovered they are in now Democratic-leaning districts. And boy, does that change your attitude overnight. So we've got a lot of reasons to be vigilant. When we talk about the backlash, here's the thing that I think we all have to recognize. And that is when a backlash comes, it hits the most vulnerable the hardest. It's not an accident that the very first piece of legislation that they filed in the aftermath of marriage was basically a bill to make it illegal for transgender people to use public facilities. You know, it's not an accident that we see hate crimes, hate violence increasing in the wake of the kind of rhetoric we're hearing nightly in Republican presidential debates, that we're hearing become part of the common coin of the realm of politics in a way I don't think any of us have seen in our lifetime. So I hope that we all take to heart that the fight is far from over, but in Florida we have things that ought to give us hope. The growing bipartisan support not only stopped bad things from happening, but it also created, for the first time in any southern state, a hearing on an LGBT statewide non-discrimination bill. We finally got a hearing, and even though we lost in a 5-5 tie, it meant that we had bipartisan support. It meant that Republican leaders stood with us to clear a path for the bill to be heard. And Senator Latvala, a Republican who is arguably the second most powerful Republican in Tallahassee, told our community that next year when I'm the appropriations chair, I'm going to make passage of this a priority. That work, that's important. So we're going to continue to build that bipartisan support. But here's a real key. And Damien is right. It is important that we understand not only that we have not, that the work is not done, but that the work ahead is probably the hardest we've ever engaged in. We've got to do this work in the schools to protect young people. You heard some stories tonight from the performers. They are experiencing that backlash. The increased visibility of a transgender community has also meant increased vulnerability of our transgender brothers and sisters and siblings. So we've got to be vigilant. It also means in the parts of the state, like where I grew up in the panhandle of Florida, it means that the places that aren't protected are experiencing a serious backlash right now. So thank you all for all of the work that you have done here locally to make Miami-Dade, to make the beach where we are right now a place where we feel protected and included. We have so many elected officials here. That's not what it looks like when we have our gala in Bay County, Florida. But it will one day. And it's because you invested here. You set a standard here. You cared here. You cared about people beyond the community that you live in. And so when we're in Tallahassee, one of the big pieces of work that has changed is that when we speak about non-discrimination, the folks standing next to us are Disney and Florida Blue and Wells Fargo and PNC and all of these major employers, Tech Data, the largest companies in our state, are saying that Florida's failure to pass a non-discrimination law is hurting us economically. It's chasing away talent. It makes it harder for them to bring the best and the brightest or retain the talent that comes from our state. And that argument is reaching across party lines and garnering support among Republicans, garnering support among chambers of commerce. And it is a message that has created a state in which the majority of Floridians live in places where local protections already exist. So we are on the cusp. Florida has a decision to make. Are we going to move forward, reject these efforts to pull us down, to embrace discrimination, and are we going to be the first southern state to pass a statewide non-discrimination law? Or are we going to follow the path of Missouri, of Georgia, of Indiana, and embroil our state in an ugly reputation for divisiveness, lack of inclusiveness, and bigotry? And right now, our state is making that decision. They're making it in Tallahassee. They're making it in city councils and county commissions in parts of the state that have been very conservative. But your investment in this work has been incredible. So I don't want to leave you with a message of that the backlash is winning, but I want to leave you with the message that the backlash is real, and we have to be vigilant, and we have to do this work. And we cannot leave our most vulnerable to the ravages of a far right that is looking for a fight because they lost on marriage. And there's one thing that Damien said that I want to highlight. When we go to Tallahassee and we're standing at the podium opposing these bad laws, it is busloads of pastors from Miami that are driving up to support these bad laws, to say horrible things about our families. And we do have to organize to stop that message from being the dominant message. So I'm proud of the work. I'm proud that we got through a legislative session without becoming a state that has embraced discrimination. I'm proud that all of you are here continuing to stand with us. And, you know, my son turns 5 in May, and which blows my mind, which absolutely blows my mind. But he's starting to ask questions, and it occurs to me that I'm very eager for him to be a teenager and for him to have no idea what I ever did for a living, for him to have no concept of a world where the work we were doing is necessary. But we don't have that world yet. And sometimes people ask me if, now that I have a kid, do I hate traveling and is it harder to do this work? And I look at him every day and I am fired up about the work. I know the state that I'm fighting for my child. And I know that we are closer to it every single day because you cared enough to invest. And I've had a lot of titles at Equality Florida. I have been bartender at galas. I've been graphic designer. I have been chief cook and bottle washer. But the one I'm proudest of, and that I just renewed, is Florida Council member. My wife and I give monthly. We know how hard everybody on this team works. And I want to ask you to do 2 things. If you see someone wearing a Florida Council pin, thank them, because it means that they have invested deeply in this work. If you don't have one and you want one, we have a Florida Council table over there, and everyone will set you up. And if you've given $1 or more to this organization, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because that is the gas in the tank that lets us do this work. And you are the reason that we have come this far, and you are the reason that we're going to climb that remaining hill no matter how hard it is. Thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you, Nadine.